Hello everyone, this is Josh and welcome to the second video on the method. In the first video, as you remember, I talked about what the method was and how to do it. That was more descriptive of what to do. This one is going to be less about the method and more about just practical stuff that I've come across. So it's less put together and more of just a bunch of things that I found helpful through doing this myself and through coaching others through using the method. So let's recap where we are. First, a quick review of the model because that's the basis of the method. It says that we exist in an environment, we perceive that environment subject to our beliefs which influence our perception. That leads us to have emotions and motivations, they motivate behavior. The behavior causes us to interact with our environment, and that's the cycle that goes on all the time. Regulating all that is reward. So when all these things are in sync, we feel reward, and we want that to keep happening, and so that cycle keeps going, or we try to keep that cycle going. Alternatively, we might feel punishment. If we don't feel reward, we'll try to stop what's happening. We try to do something to create more reward. And generally in life, I like to have more reward. More reward to me is better. And I try to adjust my environment's beliefs and behaviors to create the emotions and reward that I want. The method. Now I want to point out, it looks kind of similar. It happens to work out that it's four corners like this, but that's just a coincidence. The method is in the middle. We start with knowing your emotional system, so that's knowing your model or a model. I recommend mine as it works very well. Next is to know your emotions, what you're feeling at the time, and the current situation that you're in. Next, number two, is to create new emotions or to conceive of new emotions that you could have in the situation that you want to improve. Then to think of environments, beliefs, and behaviors that would create those emotions. And finally, to implement those environments, beliefs, and behaviors. If it goes well, then you'll feel the emotions that they lead to. And then you'll feel emotional reward when your environments, beliefs, behaviors, and emotions are all in sync. Now the question is, how do we figure out what to improve? I gave you a couple exercises to think of a situation in your life that you wanted to improve, and to think of the environments, beliefs, emotions, and behaviors of it, and then to think of new emotions and the environments, beliefs, and behaviors that could create it. How do you think of what area you want to improve? For me, the main thing is to find areas in life that have less reward than they could. When I told you in the video on the model about how you get less reward than you could, I said, imagine you have, say, your environments and beliefs are in sync, but your behavior is not, then you'll get emotions of anxiety, conflict, like anxiety or disappointment, or you might feel impatient, things like that. The thing is that life doesn't work that way, that you know what's in conflict or what's not. What life gives you is just the emotions. So generally you get the symptoms. The symptoms are feeling anxious, feeling impatient, feeling discouraged, feeling angry, something like that. Well, it's usually not angry actually. It's more emotions of conflict. So when you feel those emotions of conflict, look for the cause. According to the model, and what I've found to be the case for myself, is that when I feel an emotion, it's never just because, it's never random. It's always something in my environments, beliefs, and behaviors that cause them. And the more that I understand them, the more that they make sense. So if I'm in a situation where I don't feel the reward that I could, where I used to feel more, or other people seem to feel more reward in this situation, then I think to myself, what's causing it? What internal conflicts do I see? So I look for internal conflict between my environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Now right now I'm speaking kind of abstract, but over time as you do it more, as you start picking up on emotions that you don't really like, where you feel like there's internal conflict, you start picking up this stuff up more and more. Now I'm not saying the more that you use the model, or the more that you use the method, the more conflict you'll feel. It's not going to create more of it. It's just that you will sense it when it's there. You'll be more aware of it. And only if you're aware of it can you do something about it. So it's usually emotions like anxiety, disappointment, impatience, worry, stress, things like that. And you will start developing over time an awareness of conflict, indicating areas ripe to transform. And those could be, generally when I talk about this in the beginning, it's about picking up areas of conflict in yourself. But the same thing happens when you're leading a team. That's going to be something later, but you will start picking up internal conflict between group members, and it's very similar to see how to work on models for the whole team to work with. But right now we're working on just you as an individual. Also, you can look for reward not just in areas of conflict, but you can also take an area in your life with plenty of reward, and you can still get yet more reward. So you can take a rewarding area in life and try to make it yet more rewarding. The method works there as well. In fact, oftentimes when you use the method to improve an area of your life, you will often create an area of reward. That's often a great time to apply the method again, to make it yet more rewarding, because the new stuff hasn't stuck in yet. You haven't gotten too set in your ways. So oftentimes after you apply the method once, you might want to apply it again in the same area. Lots of great leaders and people who improve themselves a lot continue to improve themselves. And that's because of this effect. That's one of the reasons. And you can do this all the time. Where can I increase my reward? Where can I work on relevant environments, beliefs, and behaviors and rewards? I'm constantly thinking, what level of reward am I feeling, and how can I change environments, beliefs, and behaviors to create yet more reward? I gave you an exercise before to look at areas you want to improve. The first time you look at it you aren't necessarily going to find the best places to improve. So even though you've done the exercise before, that's not necessarily the best place you want to start, that area you first picked. So what are some areas that are great places to start at first? I happened to get lucky that time when I was coming home from my friend with the home run after the 3 strikes example. It turned out to be an exercise, an application that took a few tens of minutes to apply, and I really didn't have much to lose. I happened to get lucky that first time. I want you guys to get lucky the first time too. So even if you've come up with a place before, let's look at how you might do it otherwise. You start with easier transformations. Now, what makes a transformation easier? So one is that you or your team has done a transformation like it before. If you've changed part of your life before and you'd like to change it a little bit in that same area again, probably you have skills in that area and you're not too fixed in your ideas and beliefs and behaviors there. So a place you've done it before. It could be something that's small, simple, and or obvious. So that was the case for me. It was not that big of a deal for me to go to a bar and have fun because I've done things like that before. Generally, something that involves only pleasant emotions makes it easier as well. I didn't have much chance, even if things didn't work out for me that time. It's not like I'm going to go to a bar and have some deep regret that lingers with me for the rest of my life. So things that you tend to do with friends, things that tend to be more pleasant, are easier places to experiment the first couple times you do this. Things that don't involve other people. If you have to lead other people, you don't have nearly as much control or ability to understand them like you do yourself. So things that are solo, that tends to be good places to start, or effective places to start. If it's something you can copy from someone else, that can help a lot. If you know someone who's gone through a transformation before, and you can learn from them or use them as a resource, that can help a lot too. So if you're looking for changes, if it happens to be that maybe you want to get a promotion, and you know a couple people that just got promoted at the same job, that could be an area that you could learn from them. Something that builds on your strengths. It depends. I mean, some people prefer working on weaknesses, but in my experience, people who are good at something, they have skills in some area, if they try to work on getting yet more skills in that area, that's a place where they're more effective at transforming themselves. A place where you have nothing to lose. That was the case for me with the home run after 3 strikes. I mean, the worst case scenario is I go home like I was going to anyway. So something like that where people aren't depending on you, those are great places to start. Only you know what's easy or hard for you. So these might work for you, they might not work for you. Sometimes the best thing to do is just start wherever you can, and if it doesn't work out that well, you can stop working on that one, but you've learned in the process and you can start with something different the next time. I want to give a couple perspectives to describe a way to give you freedom to try the first couple times you do this. One of them is a model that I have for myself, and if you read my blog, you see I post about this sometimes. When I try something new, I have low standards the first time I do something. So what I'm saying here is not to have low standards always, but I find that if I want my first time trying something out, if my criterion for success is that I do extremely well, it often makes me do it later or not do it at all. Whereas if I set my standards as just, if I tried it all, that's success, I err on the side of doing things rather than erring on the side of not doing things. So I recommend having low standards the first time, especially if you pick something where you have nothing to lose. The other is my martial arts student and master story. A bunch of students are studying martial arts with the teacher, and they say to the teacher one time, "How is it that you never lose your balance?" And the teacher says, "What do you mean? I don't understand. Why do you say I never lose my balance?" And they say, "Whenever we fight, when we spar, we fight each other, and sometimes we knock each other over and we fall down. But you never fall down, so we think you never lose your balance." And he says, "On the contrary, I'm always losing my balance, but I'm always recovering as well." When you do these things, when you try out a transformation, you will sometimes stumble, and the question is not if you will make mistakes, it's when you will make mistakes. The thing is not to get too discouraged, but how do you recover from those mistakes? Look forward to trying, things not working out, but you will be able to recover. I say these stories to give you freedom to try doing these transformations. Another observation I've made is that when you do these things, a lot of people think when you lead someone else, you're giving them motivation that they never had before. But what I find when you do these transformations, when you create new emotions, you're creating them not because they are abstractly the best emotions to create at that time. When you're transforming yourself, you look at what emotions you expect could work for you, what emotions you think are the appropriate ones for yourself in a situation. That tells me that you're not creating emotions out of the blue, you're revealing ones that were already there. I came across this great quote about someone asked Michelangelo, how did he make David? How did he make such a beautiful sculpture? And there are 2 ones that I heard. Actually, here's the one that when I searched the net, I came across it. He said, "I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free." And I think that's a very effective model for leading others and leading yourself. You're looking for what's already inside, and by transforming yourself to create emotions that you think are the natural emotions or feel to you like the natural emotions that you would feel in such a situation, as opposed to these emotions of conflict, you are getting rid of stuff on the outside and revealing what's already there on the inside. The other way I've heard Michelangelo say this is, he said something like, I kept carving away at what was not David, and what was left was David. Similar kind of way of saying that you're getting rid of this stuff. And a lot of this conflict is when we're trying to be like other people want us to be, or following other people's standards or values. So my goal with coaching, with leading others or myself, is not to change them, not to overlay emotions on top of them or motivations on top of what they already have, but to reveal what was there before. And this is in sync with Eisenhower's description of leadership, as he said, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do what you want done because he wants to do it. And that's one of the things you're doing here, is trying to find out if the person is on a team with you, they probably want to do something similar to what you want to do. The challenge is finding out what emotions were already there, what motivations were already there, getting them out and acting on them. Not trying to impose on people, but revealing what's already there. You've already done the last exercise from the video before this, to sit with others or maybe by yourself, to start with step 0 is have a model what emotions you feel and how your emotional system works, then to see what environments, beliefs, and behaviors you already have. Those are step 0 and 1 of the method. And then to think of new emotions that you could have in a current situation, to come up with environments, beliefs, and behaviors to create those emotions. Even though you've already done this, I recommend looking at the slides before this and thinking of what could make a transformation easier, and maybe picking, if you find that the place where you're going to apply this was going to lead to an easy transformation, go with it. If not, try doing the exercise again with an easier transformation. That exercise is form small groups if you can, do it solo otherwise. Share the situation you want to improve, describe the relevant emotions, environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Have others suggest new emotions. When you come up with emotions that you'd like for the situation that you want to improve, come up with environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Clarify and refine, create accountability if you're working with others. And then finally, live the environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Feel the emotions and reward. So I recommend redoing that with something easier. If you want to take on the challenge with something harder, but I recommend starting with something easy. I find it very helpful not to try to do this completely on your own, but to use your community. How do you use your community? Surround yourself with supportive people and mentors. People who are supportive as opposed to judgmental. What types of people are they? People who did or are going through transformations like yours. So if you're trying to quit smoking, hang out with people who have already quit smoking or are in the process of it, and work together. Find people who have qualities that you want to adopt. If you're trying to transform yourself to being more fit, find some people who are fit, especially people who have gone through a transformation to become fit, and learn from them. Use them as mentors. People who are going through transformations in general, even if they are not going through the transformation that you want to put yourself through, but they're going through another, that's similar experiences as well. Emotionally, they'll be going through a similar experience, even if physically it's slightly different. Also, if you can't find anyone like that, think of people that you can help go through transformations. If you've gone through a transformation before, whether it was intentional or not, and you can help someone else through, you will see them go through struggles that you are also going to go through. And sometimes seeing it from an outside perspective helps you see yourself more clearly. People who are non-judgmental, because you're going to make mistakes. And if you have people judging you about them, it's, in my experience, harder to deal with than people who are supportive. One of the bigger challenges that people face is changing your beliefs. A lot of people are used to using willpower to drive their behavior. They're used to changing their environment, but they're not so used to changing beliefs. So I want to point out some situations that you can find that show that your that your beliefs are brittle and therefore easy to change. Some of them you're already flexible on. Some of them feel like they're completely impossible to change. But I want to point out the difference between something that's firm and something that's brittle, because brittle, sometimes you push a little bit and they shatter. And when you have a belief that's creating misery, you want them to break apart. So one of the big ones is when you feel like the model that you're working with or the belief that you're working with is very absolute. So if you start saying things like, the reality is that things are just this way, or if you keep saying things like, the truth is that blah, 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 keep in mind that lots of people have different perspectives of reality, and they might see things differently. If someone says heavier than air flying machines are impossible, that impossible suggests that there might be something brittle there. That some things do feel impossible. I don't think that I can go faster than the speed of light. So, experience will tell you. But generally, if you think things are just this way and there's nothing you can do about it, and people disagree with you, there's a good chance that belief may be brittle. Another is that if you find yourself imposing your values on others, so if you keep telling a lot of other people, you should do this, you should do that, or it's practical to do this, it's not practical to do that, Or it's appropriate for you to do this. It's appropriate for you to do that. And especially if they push back on that, if you say you should do this and they don't, and they resist you, that implies that they have a different belief, and that belief might be working for them better than yours is working for you. It tells me there might be a belief there worth giving a shot, worth trying out to see if it works for you. Another, and this kind of wraps up the ones before, is that if others do what you claim is impossible, if you have limiting beliefs, if you say it's just impossible, I can't do X, but other people are doing X, it's possible that you are fundamentally different than them. It's also possible that you have a belief and they have a different belief and their belief is working better for them than yours is working for you. So if you find yourself telling other people what to do or telling people this is the way things are and they disagree with you, it might be your belief. It might be something that you can drop very easily. Another big thing is that improvement is rarely monotonic, meaning it's very rare that a change just every day in every way it improves. Generally, it improves for a little while, then one day you find yourself back, it feels like you're way before you got started. You find yourself saying things like this: I've been working on this for 6 months and I'm worse off than I started. I'm sure people have felt things like that. I certainly have. Another is, you might feel, I try so hard. I've been working so hard and I never get anywhere. I certainly felt that way when I was starting my first company. When I was in graduate school and I was trying to be an entrepreneur, I would try to sell and we wouldn't get anywhere. Or I'd try to develop the technology and I'd work. As much as I worked on it, I felt like we weren't getting anywhere. Not realizing that all these times that I've got things and they didn't work, that was telling me something about how it could work. So if you feel things like this, I've been working on this forever, for 6 months, for a week, for however long, and I'm worse off than when I started, I suggest to you that that is a sign that you're making progress, even though it doesn't feel that way in the moment. Or if you feel like I try so hard and I never get anywhere, same thing. When you have situations like that, I recommend over-experiencing the reward. I talked about this before. Identify and magnify and indulge in the feelings of reward to get you through the difficult times. When you're in the difficult times, recognize these things happen, that's the way it goes. And I recommend not overindulging or dwelling in those less rewarding times. Another big thing is tell people about your successes. If you look at my blog, you can see all my successes, not all, but a lot of the successes I go through. And I put that out there so that the world knows. And I know that at some point I've made it really far. So even if I feel like I'm slipping back at some point, I know that I set a high watermark above that and I can keep going. And others will bring you what you tell them rewards you, so that the more that you tell people you're working on something and making success there, people who like that success will spend more time with you. And they'll tell you about times, how they made it through difficult times. Or they'll tell you about what's to come, things like that. People who don't want you to succeed won't really spend as much time with you. And another big thing is value flexibility in beliefs. The more flexible you are with beliefs, the more problems that you can solve. The less you're stuck with evaluations that aren't working for you. Another thing, this is something I come across when I coach a lot, is that a lot of times people feel like, oh, things are going really well, and they start piling on more and more transformations at the same time. Small ones, I think that can work very well. Big ones, especially complex ones that take a long time and interact with lots of other people, in my experience, work on one complex long-term transformation at a time. So if you're working on shifting from one industry to another, that's not necessarily the best time to redo your relationship with your father or your mother or something like that. Now, if circumstances force you, you might have to, but generally work on one thing at a time. This is a standard practice among many executive coaches, is work on one thing at a time. Juggling too many balls at once leads you to drop one. And sometimes dropping one can make you feel like I'm just no good at this. And when you give less attention to any one of them, you'll often work slower in all of them. And another big thing is that recognize that even if you're not focusing your attention on one, say you have 2 transformations that you could work on, and you only work on one, and you're not working on you're working on A, but you're not working on B. You might think, well, I'm putting off working on B. In my experience, the more that you transform yourself, the more that you develop skills that are relevant for all transformations. Skills like, how do you handle that feeling of like, I've been working on this for 6 months and I haven't gotten anywhere, or feeling fake, or feeling discouraged. The more that you can overcome things like that, even if you're not working, if you overcome things like that in transformation A, by the time you get to transformation B, you're going to get through it much faster than you would have otherwise, because you've developed skills in transforming yourself, skills in being more flexible with your beliefs and things like that. Even if you were working on one and not the other, you're still making progress on the other. So those skills would make a would-be complex long-term transformation sometimes simple and fast instead of complex and long. And you can do more faster. Another thing that happens is that when you plan a transformation, the way you feel when you're creating your plan, when you're sitting there writing down your environments, beliefs, and behaviors to create the emotions that you want, how you feel at that particular moment is generally contemplative, you're planning, you're at peace, you're not feeling much stress. Picture yourself, it's late December, and you want to go to the gym twice a week for the next year. Late December, maybe you just came back from working out and you feel really good about it. At that particular moment, you think, oh, nothing will stop me. I'm going to be very effective at doing this. So when you decide to change, you feel one way, capable, thoughtful, enthusiastic. When you act in the new context, you feel different. Think of yourself not when in December, when you've just come back from the gym and you feel great, but imagine it's like mid-April or mid-March. It's cold, it's dark, you're coming home from a long week at work. There's a game on that you want to watch, or there's something on TV that you want to watch, and you just think to yourself, oh, I've only gone to the gym once this week. You know what? I deserve one night not to go out. I deserve to stay home. At that time, you feel like a different person. You're not thinking about your old goals. You're not thinking to yourself, I'm giving up my old goal. You feel like, I deserve this. You feel different than you did then. And you give up on them, even if you're just as capable as doing them in mid-March as you would have been in December. And the thing is, you may later regret giving them up, because once you've given up once, it's easier to give up the next time. When you don't go to the gym in mid-March, it's not that you feel discouraged. It's not that you feel like you're giving up. It's that you feel like you do deserve to do something different. You've changed your priorities. Your priority changed from what you were thinking back in December, fitness, to I've worked so hard, I deserve a break every now and then. So willpower doesn't really help. When your value says stay home, willpower doesn't help in that situation. So you're planning on willpower before, and you're not now. So I call this an empathy gap because this is kind of a hot topic in psychology, or it was a few years ago. It probably still is. Empathy gaps are that it's very difficult when you're in one situation to think of what, or to feel what you'd feel like in a different situation. That could be how other people feel, or it could be how you might feel in a different situation. And it helps to prepare not how you feel now, but for how you will feel in the moment when you feel challenged. So some examples. A lot of times if you're trying to be more calm and less angry, at the time you say, I will not get angry. Well, in the moment when people get angry, they're not feeling like, you know what, I'm going to get angry. They feel something like, this person deserves a lesson and I better yell at them until they get it. And they feel like, I should do this. So you have to prepare yourself for the moment that how you feel when someone's pushing your buttons. Or, I won't overeat. When I say I'm not going to overeat, when I find myself overeating, it's not because I suddenly switch and say I'm going to overeat. It's like I'm with friends and my friends are eating the dessert and I figure, well, a little bit won't hurt. I'm with my friends. I should do, I'm going to do what they do. You say at the restaurant, oh, if you order some, I'll nibble at it too. It's this feeling of I deserve to indulge. It's not saying I'm going to give up. You're saying I do want to do something different. Power corrupts. Bananas. It's this movie, I don't know if you saw it, with Woody Allen. He plays a guy who's going to overthrow a dictator. And when he is without power, he says, I'm going to get into power, and then when I get power, I'm going to reform the government of this banana republic. Then as soon as he gets power, you see power getting to him, and he starts becoming a dictator. So when you can't do something, a lot of times you think, oh, I won't do that. But when you get the ability, a lot of times you suddenly feel like, oh, I will do that. So you have to prepare. What will you do when you can do something that you can't? It's a funny scene, by the way. I recommend the movie. Here's a classic example of research that people did, researchers into empathy gaps. They gave a bunch of people questionnaires of sexual practices that they would or wouldn't do, and had them rate things that they would do on a scale of 1 to 5. I forget the details, but they would say what their likelihood of doing different sexual practices would be, including things that were risky, like sex without a condom, something like that. Then they put these people in a room with a computer with a bunch of pornography on it, and they allowed them to browse through the pornography or do whatever they wanted in the room by themselves. And they gave them the exact same quiz. And they found that when people were in an excited state from looking at the pornography, they were more likely to do behaviors that were more risky. This implies that people who know what to do and what not to do, who before they get into situations where they might get excited, they have certain limits. When they get into situations where they're excited, those limits change. If you say to yourself, I will never do X, when you're calm, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will never do X when you're not so calm. Another example I like is if you've ever woken up on a cold morning and you're in a big hurry to get to work, and you say to yourself, I'm going to be really quick, I'm going to take a really fast shower, and it's cold, it's winter, and you get into the hot shower, it feels so good, and suddenly you're not in a hurry anymore. So your values change very quickly from I will go through a very hot shower, a very quick shower because work is important. As soon as you get in there and feel that warm water, that hot water on your skin, it feels so good, suddenly the shower becomes important and getting to work on time doesn't get so important. Your values change very quickly. Your beliefs change on what's important and what's not very quickly. Anger management, kind of what I talked about at the top of this slide. To say I will not get angry is not addressing how you feel when someone gets you going. You feel like this person deserves to be taught a lesson or something like that. So how do you overcome empathy gaps? A big thing is awareness. At the beginning, you want to look forward to what I'm going to feel in the moment when I'm distracted, in the moment when I'm tempted. And how can you get to a place where you can say to yourself, I knew I'd feel this way, so I expected this, and I know how to overcome it. Knowing about empathy gaps leads you to address them consciously. Having experience in this area is a big thing that helps a lot. So anticipate that you'll feel them coming. When I was in school, I was playing a sport, and in the beginning of the semester, we were trying to figure out when everybody could practice, and everybody had different classes, so it was impossible to find a time during the day when everyone could make practice. And one person said, you know what we should do? We should do like the crew team. We'll practice at like 4 a.m. And it's a bunch of guys, it's a men's team, and we're like all full of like macho, and we're like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll get up at 4 a.m. every day, and we'll never miss a practice, and we'll always make it because we'll just power through it. And one guy said, you know, it's September right now, 4 a.m., it's still light coming pretty soon, it's pretty warm. But by October, November, December, getting up at 4 a.m., it's going to be freezing out. It's going to be dark. Even by the end of practice, it's going to be dark. I know we want to do this, and we probably can, but is it going to be the most effective way for us to get practices in? And the more we thought about it, we realized he was right. We probably weren't going to be successable that way, and we opted for another solution. Another big thing is to train to develop skills to decrease this effect. When I think of like Army boot camp, I wasn't in the Army, but I think military boot camps are designed to get you to prepare for situations that most people don't experience in regular life, so that when they come, say in combat or something like that, the whole team is prepared and knows how to respond to situations that without that training, they wouldn't be able to handle. So training helps develop responses to empathy gaps. And another big thing is to see in others when they go through empathy gaps. I'm sure you've been in situations where you're with a bunch of friends and you all plan to go out on a Friday night or something like that. And when the night rolls around, one of you is just, I don't feel like going out. And you know that they wanted to before. And you know that if they do get out, they will enjoy it. And if you just try to convince them it generally doesn't work, those are situations where you realize they didn't prepare for how they'd feel, say, being tired on a Friday night. So how can you think of how to prepare them? That's probably how you can prepare yourself for situations like that. Another big thing about empathy gaps is that empathy gaps aren't necessarily bad or problems. A lot of people look at them, and most of the literature that I see says empathy gaps, avoid them, learn how to get around them. They're real problems. But I want to point out sometimes they work in your favor. So a big example for that is when I want to go to the gym, I don't tell myself I'm going to go to the gym for 2 hours, because that's a big deal to go to the gym for 2 hours. I just tell myself, I'm just going to go to the gym. I just want to get in the front door, because I know that once I start working out, I want to keep working out. So that's an empathy gap working in my favor. If I just start exercising, I'll keep exercising more. Same with going for a run. If I tell myself I'm just going to go for a run at all, I'll generally run farther than I plan to, because I like running once I start doing it. Or the big example is skiing. I don't know about you, but I like being in a warm place more than a freezing cold place. So it's really hard to get out of a hotel room when I'm at the mountain. But once I'm on a slope, I'll keep skiing all day. That's a place where an empathy gap works in my favor. Let's talk about advanced transformations. This is not what you're going to do the first time, but after you've done a few transformations, you start moving to more advanced ones. So you can achieve any emotion that you want, though not necessarily any environmental outcome. When you think of Viktor Frankl, when you think of Jean-Dominique Bauby, when you think of Mark Zupan, they weren't able to change things about their environment. Mark Zupan clearly pointed out, I can't change certain things. I'm never going to get full motion in my arms and legs. I'm not going to be able to do certain things, but that doesn't mean I can't do lots of things. Jean-Dominique Bauby, he was not going to be able to get movement back in the rest of his body. Viktor Frankl was not going to be able to escape the Nazis. Nonetheless, they were able to create the emotional environment that they wanted, the emotional situation. So an example here that I really like is that how to win an NBA championship if you're a 66-year-old grandmother. So the story here is that one time I was watching an NBA championship and a team won, and the cameras are showing all the people who won. And usually they show the big star who led the team. But sometimes the camera's moving around and you see some of the bench players. And some of these bench players, they didn't care the team. They were just there. And they're not getting the amazing feeling that the big star got. They're still really happy. They're getting the championship ring. The other story is my mother one time came to watch me run a marathon. And when I finished the marathon, she was so inspired by having watched me and everybody else run that she felt that she wanted to do it. And while she was there, she talked to people who were watching someone else run the race. And it turned out that the person running was, I think, an orthopedist in his 50s or 60s And she said, isn't it bad for your knees or something like that? And I said, actually, if you have bad form, yeah, it's not healthy. But if you have proper form, it's not unhealthy to run a marathon. And so when I crossed the finish line, she said, Josh, I'll do it. So there she was, at the time, a 66-year-old grandmother of 5, and she decided that she was going to run a marathon. She trained and trained and trained, and before that training, she had never run more than 3 miles, a 5K at all. A year and a half later, she ran her first marathon, a New York City marathon, and I was there right after she crossed the finish line. And when she crossed the finish line, the look on her face, that's what I remembered. These people who were not the championships, not the leaders of the team, she showed a lot of exhaustion, but a lot of feeling that to me looked like she was getting more emotional reward from her achievement than these guys who won the championship ring in the NBA. And that tells me that while you can't necessarily win an NBA title, you can get the equivalent amount of reward. Oh, by the way, here's the picture of my mom. There she is. That's about mile 4 in Brooklyn, running for Team Fox. So she was raising money for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So that's how you can have the equivalent of winning an NBA championship, even if you are a 66-year-old grandmother. Because I believe that she got the same amount of reward in her life as those other players did. Now, was she feeling like the champion, like the guy who led the team? I'm not sure about that. That's a little bit beyond my experience to say. I want to wrap up with talking about objections and blocks and have a productive model for how to handle these things. Because you will undoubtedly face emotional hurdles and blocks. Not just emotional, but sometimes they will be behavioral and sometimes they'll be beliefs. The perspective that I have is that objections are statements of unmet needs. When I start a project, I try to foresee what I can, but that doesn't mean I'm going to foresee everything. An objection, when my mind and body say don't do this or give up, I've transformed the way I look at it is to not thinking that I really should give up. It's saying that there's something that I was not able to foresee at the beginning that has to be handled now. But if I do handle it, I'll be able to make it through. They signal progress and serious consideration. If I'm doing a very small transformation, I might not hit a block. That just says that that's not really that big of a deal. The bigger transformations I face, the more likelihood I'll face a block. And when I hit one, I think to myself, cool, I've gotten through blocks like this before, and that tells me that this one is something that I can get through. It tells me that this transformation is worth spending my resources on. And I've learned that there are almost always advantages from another perspective. So if I look at it as a block and I try to power through it, that often reinforces the block. But if I look at it from another perspective, oftentimes, for example, leadership, what makes people great leaders is often the challenges that they overcome. So if I can get through a challenge, that often puts me in a better position to become a leader. So brute force, powering through a challenge, it generally reinforces counterproductive beliefs and behaviors. If you remember that diagram from when I talked about the method early on, New Year's resolutions, trying to use willpower no matter what it takes to overcome some behavior. If your emotions, which come from your beliefs, are pushing, are guiding, or motivating a certain behavior, and you're trying to use willpower to push against it, it will often reinforce the belief that's creating the motivation that's driving that behavior. So I don't recommend just powering through things with willpower. If it's a small thing, willpower can often work, but otherwise I don't recommend that. So I want to walk through a bunch of objections and blocks that I or people I've coached or students that I've taught have faced for how to handle things like that. So the better strategy, in my experience, is to find a perspective where the objections and blocks are not impediments, but guides for how to proceed. As usual, the tip here is don't look for blame, but take responsibility to improve things to the extent you can. If the block seems like it's come from the outside, what can you do to change your belief, your perspective, your behavior in order to make it something that's not such a big challenge? So here's a bunch of common objections. A big one is, I want to understand the problem before acting. I want to get at the root first. So a lot of people think, oh, maybe the reason I do this thing that I don't really want to do anymore, but I want to change, maybe it's because of some way that I grew up. Maybe my parents treated me a certain way, and I want to understand the depth of this problem before I ever fix it. Because if I don't, like a dandelion, if you pick a dandelion off the top, but you leave the roots, the dandelion will grow back, and I don't want that to happen. So that's what I call the dandelion model. Like dandelions that grow back, if their roots remain, if you don't resolve the source, it will continue creating the problem. That's the underlying belief of the dandelion model. Now, I've come across an alternative belief, which I call the burning building model. If you're in a building that's on fire, you don't need to know the source of the fire to know to get out of the building. So that's a different model. It leads you to different behaviors, and it leads to a strategy. If you can resolve the problem at hand, solve it. If the source is the issue, resolve it later when the stress of the problem is gone. Now, you might say, if I've left the root of it, it'll grow back again. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Sometimes you get out of the building, you look at the building from the outside when you don't have all these flames around you, and you say, oh, it's coming from that side of the building. That's where the iron was. Maybe I left the iron plugged in. Sometimes when you don't have the stress of the problem, it's easier to resolve than when you're feeling the stress of the problem. I've found that the more that I apply the burning building model, after having done the dandelion model for most of my life, the more that I use the burning building model, the more problems I solve. One or two things usually happen when I solve a problem with the burning building model, when I just solve it. The source that's so hard to find when I'm in the middle of feeling the problem becomes obvious when I'm out of it. The other thing is a lot of times I change myself, I go through transformation, and afterward I look back and say, that problem affected the old me, but not the new me. And so the problem, what I thought would keep growing back, actually kind of withers away on its own. And also the dandelion model doesn't help when you have to respond very quickly. So sometimes, out of necessity, it makes more sense to apply the burning building model and just solve the problem at hand. I predict that you'll be surprised at how often it works. Another one is, I'm not good at X. I'm not a Y person. I can't do Z. I'm sure that you've tried to help other people and they just say that to you. And it's frustrating because you feel like, I know that you're saying that, but you can. Oftentimes when we say it about ourselves, we don't feel like we can overcome it even if we could. So the underlying belief is past patterns can't change. That's the way I was before, that's the way I am now, that's the way I'll always be. An alternative belief is not to say I'm good at X or I am a Y person or I can do Z, but I suggest just realize that one's choice of language influences your beliefs. How can I restate these? And in this case, taking more responsibility myself. I like to rephrase them as I'm not good at X yet. Or I haven't been a Y person so far, but I can be. Other people have learned to do Z, and I can too. I'm not saying that those I'm not good at X could be right, could be true. I'm not a Y person, could be right, could be true. I can't do Z, could be right, could be true. I'm not arguing with that. I'm rephrasing it and saying it in a different way. So people often dwell on objection being right or true. I'm sure you've tried to get someone to do something, and they've said, look, I'm just not good at it. And you say, I know you're not good at it, but you could be good at it. And they say, look, I'm just not good at it. Well, they may be right. And they're like, you're wrong, I'm right. I recommend not dwelling so much on truth or rightness. They aren't necessarily the relevant point. Effectiveness is. You may not be good at something, but it doesn't mean that's always going to be the case. Think of the olive naming example from an earlier video. Small, medium, and large didn't sell as well as colossal, super colossal, and super duper colossal. Sometimes changing language can work better for everybody. Or another objection is that a transformation needs external resources I don't have. So a lot of people say, look, this is going to take more money than I have, or this is going to take connections that I don't have. Or it could be that it's going to take skills that I don't have yet. The underlying belief there is that you need all of the resources from the start. And an alternative belief is that you can get external resources along the way, or that internal resources provide the external resources, especially social skills. The example, see now, Donald Trump is running for president, but there's an example I used to use a lot from before when he wasn't running for president. I would point out, I doubt he's ever laid a brick in his life, but there are a lot of buildings with his name on them. So how is he able to get his name on so many buildings if he doesn't know how to build a building? He knows how to create relationships and deals that end up putting his name on the building. He has internal skills to create teams, to get the job done, to get buildings built. You can do that too. Most people don't have the solo capabilities to be able to achieve great things. They have internal skills to create relationships and teams and things like that to get resources to do things. So an alternative strategy that comes from that alternative belief is make acquiring the resources part of your transformation, which could be acquiring social skills to create teams. Another common objection is, I have to take care of real world issues first, like earning money first, or I believe things other than real world issues are indulgent, or I have to be practical or pragmatic. A lot of times this objection comes from other people. A lot of times parents say, look, you shouldn't go chase your dreams, you got to make a living. What you have there is an underlying belief that other priorities are higher. Often these priorities are defined by other people. Or to say that there's an abstract or objective ordering of priorities greater than me. It's your decision what's real world or what's practical or pragmatic. These are things that balance your beliefs and your perception. So an alternative belief is to say that my priorities are my priorities, and I work on them in the order that's appropriate to me. It takes time to learn and understand your priorities, but you can do that. That leads to an alternative strategy, which is to know what's important to you and work on them in the priority that you choose. This is to create your more self-awareness. So the more that you understand what's important to you and what you value, the more that you have protection against other people imposing their values on you. Just because they think the world has to be this way or they think this is practical doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. Only you know your priorities. Other things may actually be more important, that could be, but your priorities may also change over time. It may be more important now, but it might shift later. Also, a lot of times you hear this objection in a different format. So instead of saying I have to take care of real world issues, I have to be practical, You might say my job doesn't allow me or give me time to do something. Or that's all fine and well for others who have more resources than I do, or they have the luxury to participate in more fun activities, but I just don't have that luxury. That's another way people say something to me that's very similar. Saying that my priorities, that I don't really believe my priorities. Another objection, which I alluded to before, is you say to yourself, I've been working on this for 6 months and I'm farther back than I was when I started. Or I try so hard and I never get anywhere. So the underlying belief there is that progress is monotonic, that you always get better and better and better and better. Or that emotional challenges are like physical challenges. You can just power through them no matter what. An alternative belief is that progress varies. Sometimes you have to backtrack. Emotional challenges can make you feel like a different person. Discouragement feels very discouraging. Everyone faces similar challenges. Well, you feel discouraged. That doesn't mean that you have to act on that feeling of discouragement. So an alternative strategy is to face and overcome discouragement as a skill, to develop the ability to take on these things. I've learned through experience that when I feel like I've been working on this for so long and I'm worse off than when I started, then that tells me I've made a lot of progress. I interpret that in a new way now. Develop that skill and you can overcome worlds of new challenges. So this is a prominent example of empathy gaps. Another objection is it's just a fact. That's just the way it is. A lot of times people tell you, you can try doing that, but it's a fact. Look, you just can't do it, or it's impossible to do. And when people tell me something's impossible, you cannot overcome this thing. For me, I always think of Martin Luther King when he was just getting started. Other people, the people with the enforcing Jim Crow laws, they had more power than he did. It was just a fact that they had more power than he did. He overcame greater power, greater inertia through different ways of doing things. He's not superhuman. He's like I am. And if he could do it, I can do it. So an underlying belief is how something is now is how it will always be. Some particular fact is the only relevant fact, but oftentimes there are other facts that are valuable too. Like maybe they had more power, but maybe he's got a technique that worked really well in India of nonviolent civil disobedience that people haven't tried out here, and it could work. So an alternative belief is what appears to be a fact may not be a fact from another perspective, or that other facts may be more important. So the alternative strategies look for countervailing facts, look for things that point out that what you say is a fact is not the most relevant thing. Dwell less on rightness or wrongness, and think about effectiveness. Another big objection is my new beliefs will be fake. They won't be the real me. I'll be acting. That's not really me. I am this way, and that other person that you want me to be or that I'm thinking about becoming, that's fake. The underlying belief there is you're not going to change. The thing is that when you become a new person, you are a new person, and you'll have different values, and you'll feel natural that way. I talked about before, after you go through your transformation, you generally find yourself feeling more genuine and authentic after the transformation than you ever did before. So the alternative belief is that you will change to someone with new and different environments, beliefs, emotions, and behaviors, and they will feel more natural later. So the alternative strategy is expect to feel fake. It's a sign that you're changing. I look forward to that feeling of fakeness. Another objection is I'm embarrassed, anxious, conflicted, or will be. So a lot of times people are like, I want to try this new thing, but as soon as they start trying it, they're like, oh, I'm really embarrassed. So the underlying belief is that these emotions come from the transformation. But I point out to you that these emotions arise from the conflict within the cycles. It's expected. If you start trying new things, you are going to feel embarrassed, anxious, or conflicted. That's what the transformation is all about. That's why you do the transformation. So the alternative strategy there is to see these emotions as motivations to transform. If you feel embarrassed, think, that's a conflict. I want to relieve that conflict. I want to feel more genuine afterward. Another one I hear sometimes is, I excel in one area, so I excel in another area, so I can't in this one. The example there I see is that, the underlying belief is that I can only be good in some areas. Like if I'm good at sports, I can't be good at academics. I see that when I work with students. They think I'm good at this thing, so I can't be good at that thing. From outside perspective, it doesn't make any sense at all. But when you're the one saying it, it does kind of feel like it can make sense. Because you don't say it in such an abstract thing. People just say, look, I'm a jock. I'm really good at sports. I can't get high grade. The alternative belief is there are no limits to what I can be good at. How's that for a healthy belief? And the strategy becomes transforming yourself based on what you want to transform. Not looking at what you're good at or what you're not good at, but what you want to transform. You'll develop the skills as you go. Other people tell me not to. This is a belief that their priorities are more important than yours. Alternative belief is that your priority is the most important to you. And it leads to a strategy of do what you feel is appropriate and spend time figuring out for yourself what your values are. To wrap up these two talks on the model and the method, I want to point out that the main thing, more than anything else, what these were about is self-awareness. That was covering a lot of different beliefs, and my goal there was to get you to look at different beliefs that will lead to different strategies, not to push up against them. And so now to wrap up, the second video of my second talk, this one on the method, is this whole thing is about how to become a cathedral builder, how to love what your life is about. And I ask you, what is your cathedral? And when we think about my examples of Jean-Dominique Bauby with The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, Viktor Frankl with Man's Search for Meaning, Mark Zupan with with GIMP, is ask yourself, what and where are your castles in Spain and Atlantis that Jean-Dominique Bauby would think about when he was sitting there unable to move anything but his left eyelid? What are the ultimate and highest goals, the love of your life, that in the middle of Auschwitz that Viktor Frankl was able to think of? What are your Olympic medals and the performances of your favorite band that Mark Zupan was able to create for himself after going through this accident? What is your NBA championship, even if you're a grandmother of 5? What is the angel inside you that you can set free? Thank you.